Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to my latest video. For those who are new here, I make these little videos about things that I like and want to enjoy, usually about film, and most often it's about horror or something old from the 80s that I want to revisit. But before we dive in any further, if you're new here, you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon down in the corner to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, though occasionally I work in something else. And be sure to check out my back catalog, stick around to the end, and share both this video and channel around, as it really helps out quite a bit. Now, this is another quick one here, because this was the, well, let me just start for those who are new. I've been visiting some of these Hammer films since the beginning of 2022, and once I got through a big set, I decided to start visiting all of these Dracula films starring Christopher Lee that I'd never seen before. So I've been kind of working my way through that whole series here, and now I'm on to basically the final Hammer Dracula film that Christopher Lee did, which is the Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973, which stars not only Christopher Lee, but we also get Peter Cushing coming back as Van Helsing, or technically a descendant of Van Helsing. And yeah, so Christopher Lee did do one more Dracula performance after this in a film called Dracula and Son, but from what I've read about that film, I'll be avoiding it like a blood-borne plague. It's supposedly pretty horrible and even hard to track down. But as far as this film, The Satanic Rites of Dracula, the synopsis for this one is as follows. In the 1970s, Scotland Yard believed it had uncovered a case of vampirism. They call in veteran vampire researcher Professor Lorrimer Van Helsing, a descendant of Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. So that is basically the feel for this one in a nutshell. You know, the Scotland Yard investigation on, for this case of vampirism. And they need to enlist Van Helsing for help, as he is kind of just considered to be an expert on the occult. And it was interesting having this one final Christopher Lee performance to check out, and luckily, it was pretty good. Particularly the scenes with him and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, them going face to face, toe to toe on some of this, really came across well. I will say I'm kind of hard pressed to really review and look into which performance of Christopher Lee's would be my favorite in this set, because it would likely coincide with what would end up being my favorite film in the set, and I still have one more to go through, which is A Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. So I think I'm going to hold off on any final words until I get to that one. But I will say that this one was a really interesting one to check out. It's definitely more modern compared to the others, of course. My only complaints would be that, like in the others, the soundtrack is kind of rough. I just don't like the kind of soundtrack that they put for it. Also, the quality was very low. It may just have been the addition of what I'd watched, but it seemed very washed out and kind of grainy in a way. I feel like older films created using different filming techniques, maybe different film stock, even from the 50s and 60s. Some of those just seem to have aged better over time somehow. Maybe it's because it's set in a different setting that we don't really have that same connection to what we're more familiar with if they're in the 1800s in Romania or something, versus something in the 1970s can look more modern, and it just kind of, we could tell a little bit more that something isn't looking right. But it really wasn't enough to distract from the movie in any way. I mean, it was still pretty good, and it's still a fun one to check out, especially, this one definitely had a bit more blood compared to the others. It even had some nudity in it that gave it an R rating. It seemed a little bit more violent in some ways. But I feel like they definitely stepped things up a bit, as, we're going through this story, seeing these satanic rites, these ceremonies that are happening, seeing Scotland Yard catch on to something's happening, and that some pretty high-ranking political officials are involved as well, and calling in Van Helsing, where it felt almost like more like an investigation than a horror movie for a while. But as they get deeper into it and Dracula's kind of uncovered and is confronted about this, it launches closer into that feel of the older Hammer films. And there's a lot of fun to check out. I feel like they kind of took the good things from the older stuff in the 50s and 60s and the good stuff from Dracula AD and tried to mix those together in a way that worked a bit better in this film than the way that Dracula AD felt a little bit distracting, like all that sudden change to the storylines and the settings of everything. But it was still a lot of fun, worth checking out, and like I said, I got one more left in that set for The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. So be sure to like and subscribe and hit that little bell icon to get notifications for when that one comes up. And and then I'll be moving on to some other ones like Frankenstein or some of their one-offs. But anyways, thanks for sticking around for this admittedly very quick video, but I will see you in the next one.